in 1931. Corn was especially a culture for the southwest France. Look in 2010, whole country is used, and cranes like very much corn, as you know. If we compare the evolution of the cornfield in France, in surface, and the evolution of wintering in France, you can see that probably these two graphics are linked, and we see clearly that with the story for the Spanish friends. Landscape changes. I talk about the Lake Villers-Chantecoq. This lake in Champagne, another place in France. This place was created only in the beginning of the 70s. We don't know any significant resting places at this moment, and you can 15,000. This is in the flyway, but the most interesting is probably what happens outside of the flyway, and especially in the canal. You know probably the name of canal, we don't know by now. In the late 90s, there were no cranes unknown in the canal. You can see that the last winter. The result of the exceptional demographic evolution in the past decades, probably, of course. And the last question. In this case, how many times will the two major urban schools still exist before they connect in a unique massive flyway from the east to the west of the country? This is a partly view used from the internet system used in Germany, in Austria, in Italy, in the part of France, in Catalonia. And you can bring all the observations on the same map and find something interesting pictures. Not easy to explain, but something spectacular.
This map is a network of roads connection between.
Situation today, in 3 weeks it's about 150,000 people coming there, and it's the most important thing for the local people. I think, like here, it's a crane tourism. In 94, this building was finished, and since that it's a normal place where people go into local cranes. And I know that perhaps some of you will have the same opinion, that it's still one of the most important, and at least for tourists, the best place to see cranes in springtime. And you can get very close.
And here's a map, courtesy of just last week from ICF and the mighty Dorn, the GIS specialist. And you probably knows one, and Jim probably talk more about the increase in distribution and so forth. But well over 99% of the sandhill cranes are migratory in the 3 northern potential subspecies. But there are 3 non-migratory subspecies, and I'm here to talk a bit about them: Southeast U.S. and Cuba. So, at one time, there were scattered sandhill crane populations all across the Southeast, mostly along the entire Gulf Coast and in the peninsula of Florida. We have records, breeding records of several different areas scattered here. And we know now from genetic work from Ken Jones that soggy coastal pine savanna, again fairly close to the coast, and the decline of the birds followed the slow decline of the habitat, and this was not only due to development, and this is especially after World War II in the 1950s, with the economy expanding and air conditioning that allowed more people to live in the southern U.S. Hundreds of thousands of hectares are planted in pulpwood. And this is a very fire-adaptive ecosystem. such that fire suppression in the 1900s in just 5 or 10 years can change the coastal pine savanna into this little pine jungle there, pine thicket. Then things started to happen better for the remaining sandhill cranes. By the 1970s, they had been described as a separate subspecies, Druce canadensis. Where are we on this thing? There we go. Oh, it works. So we're way down here in the southeast. This would be New Orleans over here, Atlanta, and Florida. And so we are located in very, very south Mississippi. New Orleans here, Mobile, Alabama, Pensacola, Florida. Within about 10 kilometers of the Gulf of Mexico. I did want to mention that the Mississippi Sandhill Crane National Wildlife Refuge is a part of the National Wildlife Refuge System. You may be familiar with the national parks or forests that may not know it's the National Wildlife Refuge System. It is now one of the largest collections of federal lands in the world dedicated specifically to wildlife, fish, plants, and their habitats. There's over 560 refuges, and you can see hundreds of different vertebrates are found here, including habitat for in the area that the cranes use. And the refuge is divided up into about 40-some management compartments. Again, these are separate areas we manage for, particularly fire. So I wanted to talk about, this is again, as you may know, is a very highly managed refuge and subspecies. And so we use several different techniques. One is protection. The refuge is primarily closed to the public, but also predator control. We've been controlling predators, the #1 cause of death in all age classes in cranes there. There are more predators than there ever were before, and some new ones. Coyotes are not from that part of the country, either are red foxes, and there's way more raccoons than there used to be. And so for 20-some years, we've been removing predators, either ourselves or local contractors, removing them by using foothold traps, they're called traps, and then they are dispatched. Probably known more for fire than anything else, because you put smoke up in the sky and people pay attention. Very, very high fire frequency because of lightning, lots of lightning storms here in the spring, summer, and people have been burning very frequently here for 20,000 years. And so one of our main goals, and most of our personnel are in fire management. And so our objective is to burn nearly all those acres every 2 or 3 years. So we have those 40 different management compartments, and the objective is to burn each of them every 2 or 3 years. And the average has been about, say, 800 hectares a year. And with 65% in the growing season, that's significant because, one, for the habitat, to reduce woody vegetation, we have to burn the growing season. But you've already figured out that's their progeny or their grandbabies. And so, in many ways, the releases have been successful because they now constitute the entire population. And the sex ratio is fairly even, and as you see, 100 of the birds are banded, and that's been the case, that percentage over the last. Did I have fledging? I didn't have fledging there, but the pure number of fledged birds has increased from 1.5 a year to about 2.5. So essentially, nearly none. No doubt about it. But it seems like it really doesn't influence or help the nesting success. So what's going on? Well, we think these things are going on in genetics and behavior. And this chick is just not happy about that. So we know a lot more about crane genetics. A lot of people, especially Ken Jones, have been working. He's worked on several species. Some of you may have met him over the years. And from his work in the 2000s, that there are genetically only probably 2 different subspecies of sandhill cranes. The smaller ones of central Canada, Alaska, and Siberia, and everything south of that, from southern Canada, US, Mexico, and Cuba, are all the greater subspecies. That seems to be maybe more important, we thought. And parental defense. Okay, so I'm now going to use a sophisticated computer animation to demonstrate that. And no one really noticed this except in response to the captive cranes in response to humans, because wild cranes, the adults, of course, are trying to fly away from you. But this was first described in the 1970s. Karen Voss, working out of ICF. Ellis All described in the ethogram, that's a list of behaviors, and some other place, but it's essentially the same thing. And what happens is it's an active defense behavior where the cranes will be standing upright and maybe just a bit ahead, leaning their head. Their wings are out. And how camera traps now are inexpensive, relatively speaking, and very unobtrusive. And also CCTV cameras are very small. We have these results from Mississippi over the last 8 years, hundreds of thousands of images of different nests. And in general, there's some defense, we've noticed, again, using this behavior at crows, snakes, owls, but unsuccessful against coyotes and even raccoons. Come on, cranes. And Jerry Howard had his students analyze, again, I think it was 350,000 images, and what he found is that the actual attentative nest at the nest, there's no difference in that between wild birds and released birds. Attentiveness, but then really none of them were defending their nests. Observe the parents doing it. And then when it's time to nest, they will defend the nest and presumably the chick. Yeah. Job done. So presumably what may have happened in Mississippi with this very small population in the 1970s is that this behavior simply disappeared from most of the population. So even the wild birds, that behavior was lost. And so this may have some interesting repercussions on reintroductions or supplementations elsewhere. So besides being able to train protector-reared chicks to be adverse conditioning, so they are afraid of predators, something entirely different is they may have to be taught to actively defend using this behavior. Next slide. So these are some of the actions we're going to be doing. Is we're going to be increasing the genetic diversity in the captive flock. And Jerry Howard, the University of New Orleans, as mentioned earlier, he's an ethologist, a behavior ecologist and specialist, and he's working with some of our captive partners to develop an actual, sounds interesting, doesn't it, to have predator defense training. Well, the chicks will observe either probably costume humans attacking coyotes or German shepherds or something.
Species and inhabit in Central Asian, Eurasian steppe and semi-desert. And the species did breed makes nest on the ground, but every time close to the water sources, to lakes, to rivers, or some artisanal holes. And more often they breed on the plain area. But, for example, Tunis and Algeria. No, please. Yes. And also the other widespread range started in the Balkan Peninsula and go to Moldova and up to the eastern China. And in Spain, yeah, next please, this species inhabit in the north, is mostly in the south, mostly in the Extremadura region, and according to information from Hispanian ornithologists, the last issue or last sightings was in 1924, when hunters took cranes from there and passed them to the zoo. And in other areas, in Balkan Peninsula, for example, the cranes extinct probably in the middle of last century, and Dr. Namkinov considered that the main reason of this extinction, especially in Bulgaria, is pesticide using. And some short history for conservation plan by Dormuret. And we can see here the population which may be breed in Morocco, but a little late about it. And we see now here six population. One is from Morocco, and Eastern Turkey population, as well Black Sea population of the South European Russia, and this population can be divided in three flocks. It's flocks in the Caspian flock, Middle Don flock, and West Volga-Ural and West Kazakhstan flock. And then is a big population in the Kazakhstan and Central Asia, and East Asia population in Mongolia. Next, please. And you can see that the species is very widespread, and different population can be on the different sites. And most impact on the population is, of course, is fast economic development. This is especially in the North Africa, in Morocco, and in Eastern Turkey. And other threats is collision with electric power lines. This is also is most the last issue, especially in Mongolia, because Mongolia continued to develop, and more power lines now constructed, and probably grazing, especially in place in Mongolia, it's also connected with changing of lifestyle. Because before the Mongolians in Kazakhstan, they were moved along the steppe. Yeah, it was not overgrazing. Now the people mostly stay, they build some houses and stay on one territory, and therefore livestock farming is very big impact on the Eurasian cranes also. Next. And disturbance and organized tourism is also affect the Muslim crane population. And this is picture from Kchan, from India, whereas the people who live in this village, they're very attitude to very good attention to cranes, and they think that probably the God gives them the need to help cranes, and they put a grain in the square in the village. And many cranes, this is a desert area, and cranes, the little cranes fly there and eat. But this is area also developed as for tourism, and many construction now there, and it's the stock cranes. And along flyways, as most threats, it's of course is live trapping and illegal hunting. Live trapping is still happening in Pakistan and Afghanistan. It's traditional culture and disappearing of artesian wells. And because in the steppe, where is maybe big steppe area and not so many lakes, cranes very good used the artisan wells and drinkers for cattle. And this is, you can see the picture of livestock farming declining, and many, especially in the Volga region, you can see such a picture very often. And of course, long-term drought. This is a picture from Transbaikalia, from East Asia population. And before, this was many pairs of white-necked cranes and even red-crowned crane. And now this picture was done in 2007. Now the situation became better, but still drought is very big impact. And of course, fires. As people try to do management, and especially in the nature reserve, but fires covered huge areas and very difficult to protect habitats from them. And here, the map which we prepared also for the conservation plan, and green, you can see green is this current range, and yellow is the former range, is from the previous issue of the crane conservation plan. And arrows is show trends of crane number. And eastern population decreased much, and we don't know, probably it's no breeding birds, maybe some non-breeding, but last CITES was in 2008, according to the database of Dagadır-Negi Conservation, this conservation organization of Turkey. In Azov Black Sea, population is stable, and also population in Kazakhstan, in the center of Kazakhstan, stable. And you can see from here that number of cranes decreased mostly in the south range and increased in the north range. It's very interesting because this agriculture crisis, it can be two ways. The one way I showed you that the decline of livestock farming, but the agriculture crisis also led to a recovery of steppe habitats. For example, in Ukraine and probably in North Kazakhstan, some lands after the stop agriculture, they are suitable during 2 years for the Amazon cranes. Then they were grown, and during maybe 5-6 years they are unsuitable. And then in 8-10 years, the steppe plants became recovering, and crane again started to breed there. And therefore, probably this reason why is the population in Azov Black Sea is stable, because such a process, and also in the north of Kazakhstan. And you can see this on the eastern Kazakhstan, the area which now is very good monitored, it's Transbaikalia and Northeast Mongolia, the number of crane decreasing. And the reason is also the drought as agriculture crisis, but it's interesting that according to information from Oleg Goroshka, during the last 2 years, it's much decreased, decreasing and much decreased. And in 2013, only few, not few, but not so many